Welcome back, everybody. No intro because Abood couldn't make it today. His computer has all the intros on it, but that's fine. I'm Jared. We got Amir, and today our guest David Shawgen. Shawgen? Did I say it right?
Shawgen.
Shawgen. All right, Shawgen. He is Circassian. Is that how we say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah. He is a Circassian.
They say it in English it's Circassian, and in Hebrew it's Cherkessi. So you can say Circassian or Circassian. It's
okay.
It's okay both ways.
All right. So he's a Circassian who lives here in Israel, and he is in charge. You're in charge of, right, the Circassian Museum?
I'm the research manager of the Circassian Museum in Kfar Kama.
All right. Yeah. So he's head of the research manager at the Circassian Museum. And yeah, he's just here to talk to us and to you guys, our listeners, about his community here in Israel, a very unique one, especially considering that I bet a lot of people in the world haven't heard of them. So, David, why don't you just take it and tell us what y'all are all about? Oh, he froze up. No,
well, basically, the Circassian are, you could say, one of the most ancient people in the world, with history starting 4,000 years BC in a place called the Northwest Caucasus, which continued without stopping until the Russian Empire decided to conquer that area in the 18th century. After a long war of 101 years, they extinct half of our population, and the remaining half, 90% of them, were deported to the Ottoman Empire. And the Circassians in the Middle East basically were sent first to the Balkans, after which, about 12 years, the Ottomans lost that area as well. So after the Berlin Treaty in 1878, the treaty said all the Ottomans in the Balkan area need to evacuate. So we're going to send the Circassians to the next problematic area of the empire, to the Middle East. So 1,000 from the 300,000 who were there were sent to the shores of Akko, Haifa, Caesarea, and so forth, and were spread in the Middle East. In Israel, you have two villages, Kfar Kama and Rehaniya. You have Amman, the capital of Jordan, was established as a Circassian town, and also on the Golan Heights, there were 12 villages with Quneitra, the known city in the Golan Heights. Basically, many strategic areas of the Middle East. Now, they always ask me why the Russians fought with you so many years, and why they deported you. So the story, to make long story short, so to speak, 101 years in 1 minute, the Russians didn't have a way to the sea besides the Scandinavian part and Japan. And these seas are freezing in the winter, and the Black Sea is not. Now, in the Black Sea area, you had the Circassians, whatever was today's Georgia, whatever west of it, till Crimean Peninsula, and from the seashore up to a river that is called the Kuban River today, that was called Circassia. Any map that you would open, any atlas that you would open until 1864, you would have Circassia on the map, which is the land of the Circassians. It wasn't a state that we know today, like the modern states. There were some principalities, some egalitarian tribes, but they had common sense, common language, common tradition, and ancient tradition with mythology and stories that pass from generation to generation. And there were communication between these tribes, so they used to help each other whenever times demanded. And they weren't be able to establish a state or a country. If you take, for example, the Germans or the Italians, in 1848, when you had the birth of nations, so to speak, all the principalities of Italy and all the principalities of Germany like Bismarck with Germany and Garibaldi with Italia, they got together. At that time, we were already 40 years inside our long war, so we weren't able to be influenced with these kind of things. So that's basically a long answer for your short question.
Okay. Well, I mean, the question kind of begged the answer.
Yeah.
And when did the Circassian community make it over to the Holy Land? When did that kind of happen? When you said they came to
The last
Akko?
part of the question.
Yeah, sorry. When exactly did the Circassian people, once you left the land, when did you come to Akko and to Israel, Kfar Kama and Rechania? What kind of time period was that?
Well, we were deported in 1864, so we were sent to the Balkans and spent there until 1878. At the summer of 1878, we got to the shores of Israel, and we were scattered from there. There were several waves afterwards, but our community, about 400 people, 420 people, arrived to Kfar Kama and established that town. Another 200, 220 got to Rehania afterwards. And another group established a village near Khadera today, near Gan Shmuel, which is long gone. In the 1910, malaria, and they had to evacuate. Many died there because of the swamps. You know, even the Jews who got to Khadera had to fight these swamps. So Circassians, many died there, and the remains moved. One family moved to Kfar Kama, another one to Rehania, and the rest moved to Jordan. So that town didn't survive. From these 600, we are talking about maybe 5,000 who live here in Israel today. So you can imagine the demographic is not getting too high compared to other communities. The birth rate is not that high.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the only smaller community than you guys is the Samaritan community, which is
There are about 800 or something like that. I think we are the second. Maybe the third, I don't know, but we are a small community. You rarely hear about Circassians, not in TV, not in a newspaper. Either you met them in the army or in the university or saw something on TV, then you know about them. And also, if you visit our village, you know, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe does Natro, being a Circassian and being the captain of the team, help as well in terms of?
He's a good ambassador of the community. I remember Natro when he was a little kid coming with his father to the playground. Yeah,
you know him.
They always, I mean, we know everybody. So
all right.
They always ask me, "Do you know him? Does he live here?" And to tell you the truth, I mean, we are very happy that he's representing our community and he's a good ambassador of our community. But we are not zealous, me personally, I'm not that a soccer fan, that a football fan. But they always ask me, the guys who ask about him are those who are very interested in soccer. So they ask me, where is he now? Which team he is? Sometimes I don't remember because they always change it. But the fact that we love Natro is because he is. I mean, to summarize it, he is very keen to his tradition and his culture, and he never forget where he came from. You never saw him in the gossip sections of the newspaper or TV. You never see him in things not related to sport. So he's very professional guy, and he's avid to his. I mean, the way his father raised him to be a good Circassian, to be respectful to other people. And I think that's what makes him a good captain to the Israeli national team as well.
For sure. I completely agree with that, David. And I also think that it's important what you were saying, that he keeps the traditions and he's very aware of his roots and he's proud of that. I think it's fantastic. I also wanted to ask, talking about some of those traditions, maybe you could explain to our viewers, I'm sure they'd be fascinated to hear a little bit more about the Circassian traditions and culture and the things that you guys do which are unique.
Yeah, but could I ask one specific question before we get into that?
Yes, Jared.
Okay. The Circassians, you guys have your own language, right? Yeah, are you guys a Caucasian people, as in like Caucasus Mountains area, like related to the Georgians, or are you guys like Slavic? Like, what is your, like, what larger group are you guys? Who are you related to?
Okay, so let's start with your question then. The Caucasus is maybe second to Papua New Guinea in terms of so much languages in such a small area. So you have a mountain, you have a language. Then you go to the valley, it's a different language. So you have many languages in the Caucasus, and they divide them to three main language groups. One language group is the Northwest Caucasian group, which is our family, which is the Circassian language, the Abkhazian language, Abazian, and Wubukh. Even to pronounce Wubukh is difficult, and it's a language that got extinct, by the way, the Wubukh language. 30 years ago, the last speaker died, and the language died with him. So we have only three languages left in our family. Now you have the second close family, geographically speaking, the Northwest Caucasus, Caucasian language, which is Chechen language and related to it. So it's called the Nakho-Dagestanian language, which has probably the biggest number of languages. And the language that you mentioned, Georgian language, is part of the South Caucasian languages. So we have several languages there as well. Now, linguists try to, try to find similarities between these languages and other language families. So Indo-European, maybe Proto-Indo-European, and theories come and go in the last 100 years. I've read many theories. None of them hold water, so to say, and it's very difficult for the linguists to make solid ground and to prove. So you have today they add the genetics to the linguist, and they try to look for the origins of the people who speak this language, and they have this DNA and where this DNA came from. So in that way, they try to decipher. But the Circassian language is not like any other language that you know about. I could give you an example. I could say, good evening. Thank you very much for having me in this discussion. So it's going to be now, some hear French, some hear Persian, some hear Turkish, some hear gibberish. When I used to be in university, anytime I answered the phone, they used to say, "Hey, shut up. David is inviting a new language now. Just listen to him." So it was very funny. As if, he speaks whatever he wants to speak at that moment. So it's not any other language that you know. Slavic, that you mentioned, the Slavic languages are part of the Indo-European family. So it's not close to that, not the Sino-Tibetan family, not the Semitic family that we have it here common in the Middle East. So even though we are Muslims, for example, Arabs and Jews have more common ground than we and Arabs or we and Jews. So in that aspect, for example, in terms of language and culture, we are very different. And to answer your question, Amir, the Circassians have an ancient tradition, ancient culture, which developed for centuries, and we have an ethos that we call it Adiga Khabza. Adiga Khabza. This is the way of conduct that is any Circassian man or woman supposed to behave by it. And if you summarize it to 5 points, it's going to be, first of all, humanity. Adigara, that's the way of conduct. So Tsifra, it's humanity. You add to it which is courage, and you add to it aql, which is wisdom, be rational, and after which you have respect, self-respect and respect for others, and honor, to be honorable person with all your surrounding, including people, animal, and nature. So to give you an example how it goes, if you behave improperly as a child or as a boy, as a girl, they always say to us, "Wa'adghaba." And if you translate it, it's going to be, "Are you not Circassian?" Now we call you don't hear Circassian because we call ourselves Adiga. Our language is Adigabze, the language of the Adigs. This is the name we use for us, and other people knows us as Circassian. So in Arabic, Cherkess, in English, Circassian, Hebrew, Cherkessim, and so forth. This is a name that was given to us by the Mongols. It means that people that you cannot cross their roads, whether it's because it's very topographically hard to cross the Caucasus, or whether after which they're going to be fierce warriors that going to wait for you at that road. So they gave us as a nickname that name, and eventually it became it stuck by all. It stuck with all the. So if you come to me and say, "Hey, are you a Circassian?" I wouldn't say, "No, I'm Adiga." So it's gonna make you more confused. So we use both of the names. Now, as a children, if your uncle or your father tells you, "Wa'adighaba," are you not Adiga? That means, are you not Circassians? If you imagine saying to somebody who's acting improperly, "Are you not a Jew? Are you not a French? Are you not a German?" So
we should start doing that. Actually, that's boss.
I mean, it means if you behave improperly, you're not disrespectful for yourself and your surrounding. You are disrespectful for all your ancestors, and you are acting according to the ethics that they passed to you. So this is something, as example, we say until today, you're supposed to be like Circassian. So Circassianness and humanity, or being a human being, or trying to be, whole with your approach to life and your surroundings. This is Circassianness, basically. You can see it until today. It survived in diaspora as well.
That's really beautiful. Actually, I enjoy that. I mean, as a Jew, I sympathize with your people's story and how you guys keep yourselves together. I mean, just look at our history. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, obviously, an ancient people. I always, when we work in the museum, we always give these examples. An ancient people, very old language, and a nation that's scattered all over diaspora, a nation that suffered from genocide. These are all similarities between Jews and Circassians, and they always pop up through the questions of the visitors we have in the museum.
Yeah. Now, if I could go into a bit of some personal things. I have a few here I want to ask, but as a Circassian, when the Russians speakers really started to come over in the early 90s, did you get a lot of prejudice from the Russian immigrants in the 90s, you and your community? Because like I know Russia conquered the area, and Russians have had problems with the Caucasian peoples, for a long time, especially in the 90s, like with Chechnya and Dagestan and all that. Do you guys get any flack for that?
I mean, visitors who came from former Soviet Union. That's what you.
Yeah, like former Soviet Union, like Russian-speaking Jews, people who came from like Russian-speaking areas or parts that were the Soviet Union.
Well, to tell you the truth, Russian-speaking Jews and mainly Caucasian Russian-speaking Jews are suffered the same, not exactly the same like the Circassians, but they remember their neighbors in the communist era. So they had the same mentality and the same hardships they go through. So take, for example, World War II in the Caucasus. World War II in the Caucasus, which we commemorated the Holocaust Day this week, there are many stories of Circassians saving Jews from the Nazis in the Caucasus, mainly in Nalchik, which is the capital today of Kabardino-Balkaria, one of the republics in Caucasus, which has a majority of Circassians there. And another story, which is very interesting story of a village called Besleney, which you could say one of the few villages in history that, as a village, helped to hide Jews in it in the time of Holocaust. Not one of them, snitched on the Jews, and they were able to survive. Orphans who were able to survive in that village. I'm not getting into too much details of the stories, but the idea of brotherhood between Jews and Circassians is very common. So the Jews who came from these areas obviously know that. Now, Jews who came from other places, I met many of them, even from Ukraine, not only from Russia today, who made Aliyah from Ukraine, who remember Circassians in the army. They were serving with them, so they only have good words to say on them. So we didn't have any prejudice. The only thing we hear, to tell you the truth, they sometimes surprised to see me as a redhead or white-skinned guy, and the concept of guys from the Caucasus today, which are dark-skinned or more black than the fair Russians. Which has a reason. There are many nations in the Caucasus, and it's very mixed. And it's funny, I'm going to get to it. But before that, when they roam around Kfar Kama and see white-skinned and redheads and blondes, it's more like Russians for them, not Caucasians. So they are surprised. But look, I'm going to ask you this. In English, take, for example, you watch a TV series about police in New York or Chicago, wherever. When they say the suspect is black, you never hear the suspect is white, right? What they say
is Caucasian.
The suspect is Caucasian. So what is this word? What is coming from?
And by the way, we all thought that was weird when they started doing that over there. By the way, they don't do it anymore. But like for a while, we were all like, "What the hell?"
Have you ever thought about it? Why? The story goes like this.
I don't know.
One German guy in the 17th century had the theory that the origin of people came from four races: the black race, the white race, the red race, and the yellow race. So he divided to four races, and he said the white race originated in the Caucasus. And he took skulls of Georgians and Circassians, and he built his theory upon it. So from that moment on, every time you say Caucasian, you meant white. Now this theory and obviously after World War II and Nazism, they push it back, and this theory had flaws academically, but it's stuck in language, right? So that Blumenbach, that German scientist, left that word for us, and anytime we say Caucasian, we think about white. But look at the weird part. Anytime a Russian guy say Caucasian, he's thinking about black. Anytime American guy say Caucasian, he's thinking about white. And another interesting story, if you remember the Boston bombings about a few years ago, you had the suspects were two Caucasians. Now they always use that word, two Caucasian suspects. Now, what they meant, they are originated from the Caucasus, from Chechnya. So they always used to say that. And up until then, the Americans didn't knew that Caucasian could mean something else than white, right? So it's an interesting way of looking about words and the way they originated from. So in our village, you have the highest percentage of gingers in the whole country. Because we are predisposed, our tribe is predisposed to that mutation, and our genes didn't scatter like other communities. For example, in Jordan and in Turkey, we're very homogeneous in our towns, so we marry only Circassians. So that's why we have
a lot of red hair.
Higher proportion of gingers compared to the Israeli community and also to other Circassian communities.
So what you guys are telling me, you're the Irish of Israel.
Well, if you go back,
froze.
European guys, if you go in genetic research, a European didn't have that mutation. That mutation was started in the Black Sea area, and the waves that passed through that area and eventually got to Europe are those who have this mutation. So the Irish, the Welsh, the Scottish, and it got to United States after the famine of Ireland. Many Irish went to United States and took their genes with them. But in Ireland, because of the way it's an island, so they keep themselves for a long period of time. And in Welsh also you have 20% of gingers in that area. But in the United States you have probably 5 or 6% from the population. So the genes originate, as far as I know from the research I did, originated in the area of the Black Sea.
That's fascinating.
Interesting. Now, the other question that I really wanted to ask is that, like, as you said before, you guys are Muslim in faith. So, and you live in Israel, which is, in the mind of a lot of Muslims around the world, pretty contentious. So how do you feel as a citizen of Israel? You know, not being a Jew but also being a Muslim. Like, how does that work? And like, when you go overseas, do you tell people you're Israeli, like that you're Israeli in citizenship?
Well, you can answer these questions in two ways. First of all, you can put the politics aside and you say this is a holy land for all the religions, right? So you have a holy land for Islam, holy land for Christianity, and holy land for Jews as well. So in that term, any Muslim who would say you live in Israel, I would say to him, well, it's also the Holy Land. So what you going to say about that? And he has nothing to say. Now, in terms of the other way to answer it, you're obviously asking about also the conflict between around in the last 100 years. So we could answer this question like this. We never immigrated to Israel. So we immigrated they even didn't ask us. They brought us here. The Ottomans brought us here. We built our village. We tried to survive, and we tried to integrate and not assimilate. The Ottomans left. The British came. There was a British mandate. We tried to keep our same mentality and our same agenda to survive as much as we can without, giving up our religion and our tradition. And I think we were able to do so. And afterwards, the Israeli state was established. Now, all who's Israel were our neighbors in Kfar Kama. The first Prime Minister Ben Gurion, Rabin, the Prime Minister who got assassinated, studied in the same high school I did in Kaduri High School. Yeah, Yigal Alon, who was a minister and a commander in the army, was our neighbor in the nearby village. Peres, the former president, was also on the other side of the village in a kibbutz called Alumot. So all who's Israel were our neighbors before the Israeli state was established. So it was normal to make good connections with them. And you need to know something about Circassians, and those who don't know should know about this. If you respect the Circassians, they respect you 10 times more. It doesn't matter what's your religion, what's your culture, what's your tradition. In Israel, there is a common question they ask, where are you coming from? Right? I'm sure you heard this, Jared, Amir.
Yeah.
The first question in army, in university, they ask you, what's your origin as a Jew? Right?
Yeah.
So when they ask me, they never assume that I'm not a Jew, right? In Israel, you have people who look like Arabs and people who don't. So you either put them in this category or in this category. So they ask me, what's your origin? I say, to joke, guess. And then they try, are you from the Netherlands Jews community or from the South African community? So they have weird guesses like that. Never guess I'm a Circassian. And when I say I'm a Circassian, they raise their eyebrows and say, what is a Circassian and what is that? So the next answer is that we are Muslims. And then they never know where to put you because it's not the Muslim phenotype that they are used to see in Israel. And basically the whole idea of the conflict that you have here in Israel, unfortunate conflict, if you ask me, is a conflict between two cousins, which are more related to themselves than we are related to each and any of them. When you think about tradition and culture, when you think about religion, the fact that I'm a Muslim and there are Palestinian Muslims doesn't say I'm automatically taking their side. And the fact that Israelis serve in the Israeli army doesn't mean that they automatically take the Israeli side of the conflict. We, if you ask me, have the privilege to say to these guys if they are wrong and to these guys if they are wrong. And if you want, middlemen to help you with the conflict, maybe we could do that. But we are such a small community that we cannot change that much if the Jews and the Arabs decide to reconcile themselves. So ask Circassians in Jordan, Circassians in Syria, Circassians in Turkey even, what you think about the Circassian community in Israel. They would say to you, they're one of the most preserved Circassian community all over the world. And we are very proud of Kfar Kama and Rahaniya for the fact they were able to preserve the language and tradition. And, through the internet, we have good reputation because many reporters, Circassian reporters, came here, make some reportage and films, and we are very known in the internet world of the Circassian world. So they only know good things about us. I don't think anyone would criticize in that way. We didn't decide to live in a country that has a conflict. The conflict was here and got more extreme as we go by.
Yeah. Now,
but again, if you ask me, if you read history, there were so many worst conflicts that were already being solved that the Israeli-Palestinian, when you go outside your box, inside of the Israeli box and the conflict that we have here, sometimes they think they're never going to be peace. Arabs say that, Jews say that, but when you look about the situation in a more open approach, there were more difficult conflicts that I think already been solved, and the Israeli-Palestinian issue could be in that way as well be solved.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that, David.
Yeah.
I think that is something that has to happen in the near future, and it will take people to put things aside and come to a negotiating table together, right? Israelis and Palestinians together, get them talking again, and hopefully come to some kind of arrangement, because it's so sad to see such a holy land being treated unholy and war after war and
all this
bloodshed.
conflict in it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, before we continue on that, I stopped to check the comments, and we got a question about when we're going to make a Discord. We have one. It's just empty. We'll put the link to we'll add a link to our Discord once we're done filming here, because I don't want to take too much time away from this. But yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
I see some comments in the comment section.
Yeah. There's not that many. Like, we don't get many people viewing it when we do stream, but I just wanted to bring that up because somebody asked about Discord, and I kind of want to get that one running.
Yeah, we will get that sorted out, Jared, as soon as possible. We'll get a Discord channel together, and we'll get people talking on a server there. One thing I wanted to mention, David, as well, is when I went up to Kfar Kama and met you a month ago with Corey, one thing that I noticed, which was amazing to see, is that the village itself is pristine. It's so clean. It's probably, one of the cleanest towns I've ever seen in the whole of Israel. Why is that, first of all, and what can be learned from the way you guys treat your town and nature around you that the rest of us can learn from?
Well, they're Circassian. They have to. Don't disrespect your town.
Well, are you not a Circassian, right? When you make your town dirty, you are considered a dirty person. And we don't love to talk about it that much, but since you asked, the equation is very simple. As long as not wasting your neighborhood and your yard, it's clean, right? So if you put your waste, your village gonna be clean. Kfar Kama has a long history in Israel, and they never had a team of workers in the municipal. We have a municipal council here in Kfar Kama. They don't have team of cleaners, right? We don't spend a job on that criteria. You're supposed to clean your neighborhood. So if your street is not clean, your yard is not clean. If your yard is not clean, your house is not clean. And if your house is not clean, you are not clean. And God forbid, nobody want to be considered not clean in our village. So we call it qabzanagha. Clean. There's no good translation for it in English. Qabzanagha, it's like adigara, being a Circassian. So being a clean, in a clean mentality. And being clean, it doesn't mean only clean in terms of waste. It's also be aesthetic, right? So keep your garden sharp, keep your trees well treated, and even your animals. If you have animals who are noisy, take them far from your house to the fields. If they smell, take the smell very far. So in all the Circassian communities I've been, it's a typical thing. You know, Schumacher, who wrote about the Jolan settlements in the Circassian villages in the Jolan in the 19th century, he write about it. He say their villages are particularly clean compared to their neighbors. rather they are Jews or Arabs or Druze or Alawites, whatever, is part of the tradition that we have. And there is a competition every year in Israel, which called Kirya Yafa Be'eretz Yafa or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I see signs for it, but I never
Since the 80s.
really pay attention to it.
What?
I said I see signs for that up everywhere, but I never really pay attention to it.
It started as a project of, encouraging towns to be clean in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken. Kfar Kama won the first year, and since then it wins every year. So they have stars. Kfar Kama gets 5 stars consecutively for many years. Obviously, they add afterwards. It's not about only your cleanness, also about accessibilities for handicapped person, and how you pave your roads, and the paints and signs of streets and so forth. Now, there is a joke I always mention to the visitors. Since Kfar Kama won the cleanest village in the country, and the Jewish villages weren't able to win that prize, they decided to divide the villages to the villages of non-Jewish population and the villages of the Jewish population, so they have prizes.
So they have a chance.
So, yeah, that's how it goes now. The villages of the minorities and the villages of the majority. So either way, we win. So we don't compete anybody. We only compete ourselves, basically. And last thing I want to say about it, I'm serious. I mean, we don't see cleanness. Amir mentioned that when he came. I said, we don't see it. We see the dirt. And what's more common than leaves coming down from the tree in winter, like it rained today? For the Circassians, it's dirt and it's garbage, so they're gonna come outside and clean it afterwards. So that's part of the mentality.
Yeah. Interesting.
One thing that I was wondering about, David, as well, is you mentioned that there's communities as well in countries close by, in Jordan, in Syria, and Lebanon.
I wanted to ask about where I think you might go with this.
So, is there any connection between the community here in Israel and those communities in other countries in the region?
Yeah, basically all the Ottomans ruled all these areas before, and when the states were established, we were a little bit apart. Since the 90s, there's since the peace process with Jordan and the peace agreement, we were able to visit Amman. Amman, as I said, was a Circassian town when it was established, and today it's the capital of Jordan. It's much easier for us to visit them than for them to visit us, because Jordanians need visa to come to Israel. So you could have examples of, going to a funeral or at the same day and come back if you have the option to do so. Circassians in Kfar Kama use that opportunity. And also marriages. Since the 90s, the communism fell, peace process with Jordan, democratization process in Turkey. So all these communities were opened or reopened. All ties were renewed, new ties were established, and marriages between the communities as well. The biggest community in the Middle East is in Syria, even after the civil war. Some say it's about 90,000 Circassians in Syria. We don't have exact numbers, but we estimate educated guests, so to speak. They are scattered in the Homs area, Damascus, and several villages there. In Jordan, as I said, the majority in the capital. And in Turkey, you have millions. The Circassians, which are not in homeland, are in Turkey.
Okay. All right. So Amir, your question wasn't the one that I thought it was going to be.
Mhm.
My question is, like, because I know Circassians will serve in the army here in Israel. They'll serve in the Israeli army. And since my guess is that some Circassians probably served in the Jordanian and Syrian armies, but was there like pain in the Circassian community when Jordan and Syria and Israel, all these countries went to war because there's a chance that the soldier on the other side might also be a Circassian?
Of course, I mean, Circassians never, even if they are warrior people, warlike people, they never loved war, and
Yeah.
they always defended their territory. And when we were scattered all over the globe, all over the Middle East, as I said, you had Ottoman and was British French mandate. You have World War One, World War Two. Sometimes there were conflicting Circassians even in that war. And you also have the wars in the Middle East, the Israeli wars, 6 Day War, and 73 war. In 67, when Israel conquered the Golan, there were 20,000 Circassians in the Golan Mountain. Majority of them fled before the army got there, but there were Circassians who stayed there, and they weren't able to stay anymore because it was considered as a conquered area, military zone. So you have to evacuate. Now, my uncle and his uncle, I mean the uncle of my father, was selling petrol to the army, and he had a sister there in one of the towns who had a house. And once they used to send pictures, not in WhatsApp, but a real picture in shoebox. You send them, and they keep it under the bed. So when they got to the house, they found pictures that they sent maybe a few years ago of the family in Israel. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, that community never gonna be reestablished there. There were two villages who left in the Syrian part, Briqa and Bir al-Ajam, but they also suffered in the civil war in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So all these conflicts, we sure suffer from them as Circassians in Jordan, Circassians in Syria, and Circassian in Israel. But you never know, right? You had Jews in World War One, for example. I always give that example. You had Jews in the Prussian army, in the Ottoman army, and in the Austro-Hungarian army, who fought each other.
Correct.
Now you either take him down or you either being taken down. You don't know if he's a Jew or not. He has a soldier with a gun, so you don't know that. You pray you won't do it, but you never know. Sometimes you never know. I know some Jordanian pilots who refused to get inside the airplane in a fear for any Circassian in Israel could be harmed in any of these wars.
Wow.
They had their high ranks and they afford, themselves to do so. But it's an army. I mean, you get your jail time if you do so, let alone being considered as rebellious or God forbid. But that's the fact of history. So thank God we don't need to fight with Jordan anymore. Syrian army is not relevant in that case to fight with Circassians there, and hopefully we won't need to do so.
Yeah.
I hope so too. I hope so too, David. And I think, and I think, you were touching on there the pain of war and that this region has seen. We went through a few of the countries. Part of that is why we're doing this channel. We're trying to get people talking one with each other from different communities and trying to build a new future out here in the Middle East, because this whole region has had enough of warfare and this kind of pain on all sides. And I just want to thank you for coming on and taking part with us and teaching us about the Circassian community. I was just wondering if you'd tell us a little bit about the dress, because I noticed when in the museum you have some very interesting clothing and some of the artifacts that I saw there from Circassia that was brought over was some really ancient objects. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to welcome you guys. Gerard, you haven't been there, and the listeners that to come and visit our museum and see the exhibits. We rarely had time, Amir, to have the full presentation because there were other stuff going on in the museum. But there are many ancient artifacts originated from the Caucasus or been used in our village for many years before that, and we present them to our visitors. You mentioned the clothes. The Circassian dress is very unique. It's a battle dress, warrior's dress. Every Circassian, since the age of 14 until he died, was considered a warrior, whether he is, or gathering his horses and breeding them. He was considered as a warrior. Now, he didn't choose that. Any empire who came from east to west in order to conquer the world wanted Circassia as well. That's how their clothes were warrior clothes. And you see a very interesting thing. You have bullet cassettes on their chest. It's like cigars. They always ask me whether there are cigars. No, they are not. They are bullet cassettes. Once there were no cartridges to the gun, and you have to pour gunpowder, but it's clumsy and it's slow, and you have to get it from your horse. The Circassians had a better solution. While riding on your horse, you could pull it with your teeth and charge it twice, even before his enemy did it once. So it was much faster because you had the exact amount of gunpowder in each bullet cassette. Now there were from 8 to 9 on each side. They were in that shape, so it showed your chest much bigger than it really is as well. And there is a saying, 8 for the enemy and 1 for the rider. So 8 with gunpowder, and those you cannot get to them, either filled with smoked cheese or smoked meat, and first aid. So this is your first aid kit and your ammunition, whatever you need, it's over here ready on the chest. Until today, we use this national costume. Obviously, it doesn't have any gunpowder inside anymore, but it's part of our tradition, so we use it. And it's spread all over the Caucasus. Other Caucasian people took it for themselves as their national costume. Even the Jews who were in the Caucasus adopted that costume. There is a funny anecdote when the Zionist movement made they had congresses, right? So in the third Congress, there were 2 Jews from the Caucasus who came to that Congress, and Herzl looked at them and say, and I would like to congratulate the Circassian Jews who respected us and came to visit this Congress. He said Circassian Jews, which is mean not Circassians with a Jewish religion, but Jews who came from the land of the Circassians. That's why it's like saying Iraqian Jews or Yemenite Jews, Circassian Jews. So that's how we call them. And until today, the costume in Russian, they call it Cherkeska, which is literally means of the Circassians. Yeah, because the Cossacks also adopted this costume.
I wanted to bring that up because the costume the outfit, I guess you were describing is something I would associate with the Cossacks as an American.
Yeah, whatever you know about the Cossacks, whatever they are being known for, their overcome their skills with horses and so forth. They all learn it from the Circassians. Basically, they were in the peripheral areas of the empire, and their immediate neighbors were the Circassians. And some historians say there could have been good relationships between Cossacks and Circassians, if not the empire used them as their dogs unleashed against the Circassians. So the avant-garde of the army were the Cossacks, and they were the first to attack the Circassians. And they immediately recognized it's very good costume for the winter, for riding on horses. So why not to adapt it for us? And they adapted it. And also the sword, what Russians called shashka, has no meaning in Circassian. It's in Russian, sorry. Shashka in Circassian is seshkwa. Se is knife and shkwa is big. So we call our knife, our sword, big knife. And the Russians adopted it to their army until it became the official sword of the empire.
I like that big knife. What is that? Is that a sword? No, it's a really big knife.
Yeah, it's big knife. Yeah, because we have a dagger. The Circassians always, and you saw that, Amir. They always went roam around with a dagger on them. That's part of the costume. Even when I bought my kid his first costume when he was 6 months old, it came with a little dagger, right? So it's part of the costume, whether you are 6 months old or 15 years old. And a costume without a dagger considered as not whole. And they always wear it. And the sword was on them only in times of war, which is in the last 100 or 200 years was most of the time. But this is something not always with them. But the dagger was always with them.
Yeah. They only brought the big knife out for the serious stuff.
What?
They only brought the big knife out when it got...
you have the small knife for regular things, even chopping, your apple or your putting some, I don't know, something on the bread. But the big knives are for the big guys and war. Again, as we joke about war and warlike people, we really, even though it's part of our tradition, Circassians never conquered other lands and never tried to conquer outside of their territory. They always wanted to protect their land. And the only way they could do it is, even start sending their kids to foster families from the age of 7 till 14 to raise them as warriors. And when they come back, they already know all the skills that they needed to know, and that's the only way they could survive in that territory in that times.
It was a matter of protection, right?
A matter of defense. But I also want to ask, so in Circassian, you have knives and big knives. So what do you call rifles? Do you call those big guns? And if you call those big guns, do you call cannons really big guns? Like, how does it work?
Well, cannons, we took the Circassians didn't use cannons. It brought to them from the Ottomans and so forth, and also the Russians. We call it top. Top has some origin in Turkish, but in Circassian, it's the sound that you have when something is popping out from somewhere. So it's called top. That's why a round thing is also called top. And guns are called shkwech or shkwanch, which, to tell you the truth, I don't know the etymology of that word. I don't remember it now. Right now, the pistol, we call it cherach or kerach, which is literally revolver. So it's the revolver one. They call it because kerach is to turn. To it's a verb of being turned. So You just call it that way. Circassian language is very simple, as I said. It's very metaphorical and very figurative language. So that's how we call our gun, something that turns. Revolver.
Interesting. Well, because you're such an interesting guest, and I mean, we are almost out of time, but I see that our legendary viewer, Mawar Farnesi, is here, has been here for about 11 minutes so far, I think. I just want to say this to the audience, anyone who's watching, if there's any special questions you want to ask David now, put it in the comments before we have to end this with the thunder strike of righteousness. I will take it all down.
That's it. And I just want to thank you again, David, for taking the time out of your day to sit down with us and to explain to us more about your community. And I really hope to be up there again soon. Maybe I can bring Jared.
You're more than welcome. Bring Jared with you.
Hey, will there be snacks?
Yeah, we will treat you with the Circassian pastries filled with Circassian cheese, something even Amir didn't have.
I will take that.
Yeah,
I will take it. I love cheese.
Yeah, so you are more than welcome to enjoy the full tour and hear other stories that we didn't mention here. It was delightful to be with you guys, and always a pleasure, to spread the word. If any one of you loves what you hear, just spread the word about the Circassians. As we said, small, not many people know about us, and the more they know, maybe the more we're able to preserve ourselves and our traditions. Thank you very much for having me.
It's no problem. And once again, it's Kfar Kama. Is that it?
Yeah.
Kfar Kama. Yeah, so Kfar Kama village in Israel, look it up if you want to go check it out and get some Circassian pastries. Check out the museum and meet David himself. But I don't see any more questions, and we got to make sure we don't go too much over an hour. So unfortunately, guys, Amir, the episode's over.